when I see videos of the military occupiers murdering a couple of surrendering people, yeah, I'm going to scrutinize that. I'm going to have an opinion on that. And it's just absolutely outrageous that you guys sit here when the whole world is watching. Sir, let me be honest with you. When the whole world sees you describe the IDF as fighting terrorism, we're all going, I don't know how dumb you think we are. The IDF, you were a spokesman for the biggest terrorist organization in the region.
Dave Smith just humiliated an Israeli spokesman for promoting terrorism and defending genocide, and in this clip, he rips this guy a new one. It seems like a humiliation ritual to go up against Dave in a debate like this these days, but here's his latest target. It gets really fiery, and I can't wait to watch, so let's do that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think you hit a lot of it exactly right, Pierce, which is that, right, look, it's not just that the incident happened, which is horrible enough, but then the way that IDF spokesmen and the highest ministers in the government just lie through their freaking teeth about it. Like, they've been caught so many times, Pierce, and you're absolutely right. There's a whole lot we don't know about, and I think when you won't let the media in, it reasonably leads to a presumption of guilt. The presumption is that you're trying to hide a lot of things, but just look at what we do know, Pierce. We know that there's been multiple doctors in Gaza who have reported that toddlers have been used as target practice. We know that the IDF has admitted, multiple IDF soldiers and the Israeli government has admitted that they were firing live rounds into sites where people were desperately trying to get a little bit of food. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in this way. We know about the Where's Daddy program. We know about all types of like indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians. And every single time they lie through their teeth about it. And so I'm sorry, Jonathan can phrase this as like, that's not the IDF. People should be held responsible. There's an international, well, it seems to really often be exactly what the IDF does, and nobody ever seems to be held responsible.
I mean, it's very hard, again, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, it's just plain true that many people have come forward, including whistleblower Anthony Aguilar, who I just recently interviewed, about the live rounds being fired over these massive crowds, but it's just not that. It's setting up these aid zones and reducing them from 400 to 4, by the way, and then that was later reduced to 3. It's forcing people to walk through these narrow corridors, firing rounds in tumultuous situations and producing conditions that lead to stampedes. And that's where you have IDF murdering people. And according to Aguilar, this happened deliberately. They were literally using these aid stations as lures to bring these Palestinians out, sometimes from many kilometers away, just to find food, scraps of food in these meager living conditions, having been flushed out by the IDF in this atrocious genocide, only to find themselves murdered. That's what's going on here. And people are catching notice of this, right? We're not going to go back to this Zionist mantra where it's Israel's just defending itself. Absurd. Dave's right.
It is very hard to maintain a position that the IDF and these security forces were operating, as you say, under their command, that the IDF is the most moral army in the world when you see them literally breaching the Geneva Convention on tape. You see them executing people who have just surrendered. That is a breach of the Geneva Convention, specifically set up to prevent these kind of crimes.
Piers, I think, you know, a moment of honesty here, if we all may. It is actually quite tremendous, you know, the level of scrutiny of the IDF and of Israel, of Prime Minister, which I'm not here to defend, but I am speaking on behalf of my country in a sense. I think that, you know, the level of interest, scrutiny, and alleged focus and care about what happens, it is mind-boggling to see how much...
How is it mind-boggling? You're killing people in 4K by proportions of 80 to 100 times what was done on October 7th, and expecting Americans to finance it? And once they see that in 4K, I'm sorry, there's going to be scrutiny. Scrutiny is the natural result from genocide and killing about 100,000 people, maybe more. Lots of people displaced, presumed dead. It's hard to completely know about the numbers. But scrutiny, you're surprised about the scrutiny? You don't understand the scrutiny? Well, then you're an alien life form that doesn't exist on the same planet with the rest of us.
People allegedly care when it comes to dealing with issues that are related to Israel. And I think that one, you know, there's merits to what you've been saying, and of course, seeing a video like this it looks horrible, and that is what I said, and I believe in it. And I also believe that just like in the past, and the name of that soldier was Elor Azaria, you can check it up, what happened to him, how the IDF dealt with the issue, internal pressures, political pressures that, by the way, weren't very unsimilar to the current situation that the IDF is dealing with a complex political environment where everything is sensitive, where it is Israel fighting against terrorist organizations, and where we have politics that are involved in fighting. But at the end of a long process and public debate, that soldier was held accountable for his deeds. And
Okay, he's saying it's Israel fighting terrorist organizations. It's like, no, we aren't oblivious. It's Israel fighting the civilian population and depriving it of aid, even in this ceasefire that was supposed to guarantee 600 trucks per day, reducing it to 300. No, it's actually Israel that's the terrorist organization fighting a populace that can barely resist, let alone eat every day.
I believe that if these policemen are indeed at fault, which the video looks like they were, but we shouldn't be hasty in delivering a sentence here, then they will too face justice and they will face consequences.
You know my other problem, though, Jonathan. Jonathan, my other problem
is just an assertion.
When you fight, but
I know what you're going to say.
When you fight,
let me just say this. Here's the problem.
But I mean, let me say it, Piers.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the amount of engagement, the amount of attacks, the amount of activity that Israel is forced to do every day and every night in order to defend itself, a very small percentage of activity doesn't go exactly as it is supposed to.
A very small percentage. Are you listening to this guy? By Israel's own data that was leaked from their own database, this is an Israeli source, they said that 83% of the Palestinians that had been killed in Gaza were civilians. That's not a very small percent. And how did they get to that figure? Well, it's taking that database and comparing the people that died to lists of members in Islamic Jihad and Hamas. And that yields that 83% are innocents. No, it's not a very small fraction, very small percentage that goes wrong. This is the rule. It's not the exception. That's why it's a genocide.
Yeah, but hang on. But I've just got your word for it. But Jonathan, Jonathan, hang on. We just have your word for that. Because the Israeli government continues to ban all international journalists, even though there's been a ceasefire for nearly 2 months.
That isn't true either, Piers, and you know it. There's been more than 60 journalists inside Gaza since the ceasefire.
There are people from Israeli government-friendly media taken in, embedded, and
international journalists.
Really? Well, why is
international journalists?
Well,
Piers.
Clarissa Ward.
60 crews have gone in, including CNN and.
Okay, well, Clarissa Ward, I'm glad you mentioned CNN, because Clarissa Ward is one of the top people at CNN, one of their top international journalists. And she said, this is your scheduled reminder, she posted today, that international journalists are still not allowed to report freely and independently inside Gaza. We're more than 7 weeks into this ceasefire. The previous excuse given by Israeli authorities for the banning of journalists was it was a security consideration, which was seen by many as a smokescreen, as articulated by the Committee to Protect Journalists. For 2 years, Israel sought to control the narrative on Gaza with a range of measures that are unprecedented.
Yeah, by 60 journalists being in Gaza, he might be talking about, well, Israel's killed 260 journalists in Gaza, which is a real figure that is substantiated. You know, I don't think they've really let international journalistic crews in there. I'll have to look into that, but this is really the first time I'm hearing about it. So we'll see, but if they really wanted transparency and were fine with transparency, which they aren't in Gaza, that's why they wanted to take over TikTok, buy it out for the Ellisons, and shut down those videos coming out of Gaza, then they would allow all journalists in. There'd be no restrictions. You could cover this, but they're trying to hide the truth. That's the truth.
Compared to any war in modern memory, said CPJ CEO Jody Ginsburg. This includes targeted killings of Palestinian journalists, attacks on media facilities, the banning of news outlets, and the prohibition on independent media access. With a ceasefire now in place, Israel cannot be allowed to normalize this unlawful behavior. And yet here we are, she says, on Monday, December the 1st, an international journalist still cannot report freely and independently inside Gaza. And the problem is, Jonathan, and I know you agree with with what I've said about this before. The problem is,
but let
the
me
problem is
comment
it
on
leaves
that.
us. We have to then take your word for it about how the IDF has operated, because we can't get
Piers.
independent
You
word
don't.
for it.
But
It's
that-
only when
that-
these videos come out that it looks like actually they're not the most moral army in the world at all.
It completely contradicts that and makes them look like the most immoral army in the world, which they probably are, right? We know that. It's just not an isolated incident at this point. It's just not. It's too easy to see this from the videos, from the whistleblowers, from all the attacks, from the disproportionality of the violence, from just the displacement of families and children, which, by the way, is one of 5 qualifiers that meet the Geneva Convention standards for a genocide, the forced displacement of children, which this is. Even if you take off all the other considerations, all the deaths and all the starvation, that would still qualify.
Piers, that Clarissa Ward that you're quoting and singing her praise is the same Clarissa Ward that I remember shooting a selfie video with big crocodile tears over a Palestinian
she got
so-called
duped.
journalist.
She got duped.
Who, in fact, I forgot his name. Yeah. Well, no, she didn't get duped, and I don't think she did, and I don't think that
No,
she
she did.
ever owned up to her mistake.
No, she made a
She
mistake,
did?
and
Did she own up to her mistake?
Yes,
Did
she
she own
did.
up to it and
Of course
say,
she did.
"Oh, I called this Palestinian terrorist a journalist, and I sang his praise," when in fact he was a known
They made
and
no
official member of a
pretense
terrorist
that it was a
organization?
mistake, and they got duped. But she remains one of the outstanding foreign correspondents of her entire era. So to question
What
her
I think
word,
she remains is someone who has clearly shown her bias, clearly shown her personal
she got
bias when it
duped. It
comes to
happens.
the Israeli conflict. Well, did she?
I don't know enough about this, but it isn't germane really to the underlying issue that this is terroristic atrocities committed by Israel, and I hope it returns to that soon, but I haven't followed this close enough to really have a strong opinion.
Did you do a fancy video
Piers,
saying I got duped and I said something that was wrong and I misled my millions of followers on Instagram? I don't think she did. I think I would have seen that video if she would have, but she didn't, which shows you exactly a type of bias that Israel deals with.
All right, let me
Israel
bring in
deals
Dave.
with
Let me bring in
scrutiny,
Dave.
bias and double standards like no other country, present people included.
All right, Dave.
Okay, let me just respond to a bunch of stuff that you've said there. And you called for a moment of honesty here, which I think I'm honest every time I'm on this show. But in the spirit of this moment of honesty, let me just be honest with you, okay? This tactic that you just used, that we all just witnessed, where first you're saying, we have let the media in. I don't know what you're talking about. 60 different crews have been let in. And then Pierce shows you a CNN foreign correspondent saying, let me just finish my point here. Then he shows you a CNN foreign correspondent saying, hey, we're not allowed in. And then you immediately turn to a character attack on her. You immediately turn to, oh, she's a bad person. You see, she's sympathetic to Hamas or hates the Jews or something like that. People are onto that and they're over it. Let me give you some more honest information here. For you, I'm an American. Just like you said, you're defending your country, Israel. I'm an American. Your country is on my country's welfare. We have financed and given you the weapons and the diplomatic cover and the literal protection and vetoed the resolutions at the UN. We have protected and propped up Israel. And you have a lot of nerve to turn around and then say that we scrutinize what you do too much. I am forced against my will to pay for the destruction of Gaza, to pay for the military occupation of Palestine. And yeah, when I see videos of the military occupiers murdering a couple of surrendering people, yeah, I'm going to scrutinize that. I'm going to have an opinion on that. And it's just absolutely outrageous that you guys sit here when the whole world is watching. Sir, let me be honest with you. When the whole world sees you describe the IDF as fighting terrorism, we're all going, I don't know how dumb you think we are. The IDF, you were a spokesman for the biggest terrorist organization in the region, objectively the worst. And it's a region full of terrorist organizations.
Yeah, Dave is exactly right here. I just love to see him fry this guy. This is fantastic. And Dave is actually right about the scrutiny. For all the talk about scrutinizing Israel, and there is Israeli dissidents, I think rightly so, because this is a genocide, because they are on our bankroll. We're tied intrinsically to the hip with Israel. That's why John Mearsheimer calls that regime an albatross around the neck of America. There actually isn't scrutiny from our government toward it. If there were, we'd cut Israel off. We'd decouple, we'd cut the chain, cut the umbilical cord right now, because enough is enough. And we wouldn't allow special carve-outs either, like your precious lobbying firm, AIPAC, in our government being the only foreign lobby that doesn't have to register under FARA. Imagine if we allowed that for, say, the Russians. They'd immediately be called traitors, right? They'd immediately have their reputations tarnished in mainstream media for being part of a Russian lobbying group that doesn't have to register under our base law that applies to all the others. That's what we're dealing with here. So the truth is that they aren't scrutinized. In fact, they're immune to the scrutiny that any other country would have from the internals of our government. Now, the American people, certainly so. And guess what? You get scrutiny when you commit a genocide, and now we're in an age where 4K video exists. That's what you get.
And the IDF is the worst
The
one.
moment, I mean, you had my ear and attention and a bit of my respect until you said that nonsense.
I don't care.
The last part of what
I don't
you
care
said.
about your
You're
respect.
entitled to. Yeah, that's fine.
You're a spokesman
That's
for a
fine.
terrorist
you are entitled
organization,
to your
sir.
opinion.
I don't care about your respect.
You're entitled to your opinion sitting in your comfortable office in New York or wherever. You're entitled to have your feelings and opinions. The fact that you have them doesn't make it right. And the fact that you call the military of a nation state a terrorist organization, I think shows how ungrounded you are. And frankly, it's ridiculous.
No, it actually shows that he's sane and he has eyes to see and reason to make judgment calls based on the actual evidence that we've seen from the videos, from the whistleblowers, from things that have come out, from even Israel's own statistics on how many people have died in Gaza, from all the broken buildings, all the rubble, all the children pulled up from the rubble dead because of this. For him to say that and acting like, oh yeah, it's Dave sitting in the comfort of his office in New York. Well, where are you sitting? You're not in Gaza. You're not in Gaza either. So this is just absurd.
Yes, I made that specific remark about Clarissa.
You might as well have just been quiet for 30 seconds.
I said,
what is that? You're comfortable in New York City.
Specifically,
you
what
say
I
a
said
state government
about,
is a terrorist organization.
I said what I said about Clarissa because I think it is very relevant when people who are when people who have the role and the power as the main conduits of information that shape hearts and minds and that really tell the story of what's going on, allegedly what's going on in Gaza, when they are shown and exposed to have a very clear anti-Israeli bias, yes, that is part of the story. That needs to be informed, and people should know about that because I think. No, it isn't only that. And again, had it only been getting a story wrong and owning up to the mistake and saying, well, I sure got this story wrong and maybe I should look at the other stories I got wrong, then I wouldn't have mentioned it. But I mention it because I think it is part of the issue. The level of scrutiny that Israel is under by so-called journalists who are basically opinion people that have big accounts on Instagram and corporate funding.
How is a country tied to the American hip that Americans are bankrolling not going to get scrutiny for what they're doing in Gaza? Tell me that. And by the way, yeah, Israel is a terrorist country. It's a terrorist bastion among a region that has many terrorist groups. You might say, you know, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist and vice versa. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But this is a region with Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda for a time and ISIS and Muslim Brotherhood. But Israel has killed the most people in these atrocities, and it's just true. You can't discount that, and anytime someone talks about the amount of scrutiny on poor Israel is just absurd. You're the only country in the Middle East that has a secret nuclear weapons program too, which gets into wars and drags my country into on the absurd basis that another country has a secret nuclear weapons program. That's what we're dealing with, and it's totally absurd. Cut the cord. Netanyahu's a genocidal maniac. Anyone that speaks for him, their takes are not going to age well. And anyone who speaks glowingly about the IDF might be looked at in the future as someone that fluffs the Schutzstaffel, the SS. So that's what we're probably dealing with here.
In terms of networks, is unprecedented.
Well, Clarissa Ward is absolutely. I will defend. Listen, Jonathan, I will defend Clarissa Ward. She is not, as you're categorising her. They got duped, and CNN conceded they got duped. right? It was an elaborate sting to this guy to pretend to be somebody he wasn't, and they got duped. It happens in news. And CNN immediately held their hands up and said, when they investigated, we got duped. But when it comes to investigations, I'm glad you raised that, because there have been myriad investigations launched by the IDF, launched by the Israeli government into allegations against the IDF. And you know the almost universal common denominator? We never get to hear what happens to them. We never get told the findings of all these investigations.
Here's the findings of the investigations, Pierce, if you really want to know, and it's the same in the United States. It's that the government investigated the government and determined that the government did nothing wrong. Same thing with JFK, same thing with January 6th, same thing with the Epstein story, time and time again. The government gets off because they have a monopoly on violence. Governmental institutions have immunity from the same things that would put us behind bars for life. That's just the truth. That's the pernicious and toxic and corrupt nature of government. And it really does manifest in Israel too, right? Because the Zionist cause and the Greater Israel Project depend on not having any scrutiny, which would be held as a standard for any other country toward Israel. Certainly that's true.
Read out dozens of them a few months ago. Unresolved. It's just, we're investigating, and then they just hope everybody moves on. And that,
did you read, Pierce, did you see on Friday, did you see the UN Committee on Torture on Friday just released a new report saying there's widespread torture of Palestinians. Hundreds of them have died from torture in the last couple years. There's widespread, like, what are we even talking about here? Israel's under too much scrutiny?
Yeah, the reason
Israel's torturing people to death.
Well, the reason, Jonathan, that Israel is under so much scrutiny is precisely because it goes out of its way to avoid scrutiny. Right? It literally bans.
I don't think that's the reason. If you're honest, Piers, I don't think that's the reason at all.
Well, let the journalists in.
Let the journalists into Gaza. The reason at all.
There's a ceasefire.
Think that is the reason.
There's a ceasefire.
I agree.
But Jonathan, the bullshit.
Let me call it. He's going to say it's anti-Semitism. That's the reason. That there's scrutiny on Israel. No other reason. Not people watching babies die. It's going to be anti-Semitism. I'm just going to predict it. Let's see.
Should excuse that it's for the journalists' own safety, which was always bullshit, because they've all reported from all sorts of war zones,
and here
including
I agree with you.
Clarissa, who's a very, very courageous journalist.
And we've spoken about it a lot.
Let them go in and do their jobs.
I agree.
Then we agree.
I agree. And
but that's why you get scrutinized.
A long time ago. No, that isn't why we get scrutinized, Piers. That isn't why international network, Piers. That isn't why international networks have their biggest out of London or out of US offices in Jerusalem, out of all places in the world. That isn't why the amount of international journalists per people here is the highest ratio in the world. That isn't why news editions around the world and internet and TV and shows like yours have such a tremendous focus on Israel. It isn't because Israel tries to evade scrutiny. It has to be different things. It goes back deeper. It is rooted in history. It is rooted in the land that we're in. It's probably related to that old hatred against my people and many other things.
Yes.
But at the end of the day,
well, that's it. Okay, so
it's all just
yes. All right, hang on.
Pierce, can I just respond to Pierce, please?
Dave?
He did it. He really did it. It's all just anti-Semitism, right? That's all it is. It's just anti-Semitism, which has swept through America, where 2 years ago, the American people didn't have this outburst of anti-Semitism, and then, saw a bunch of murders, and it wasn't the murders, it wasn't the babies starving, it wasn't them plucked up from the rubble, it wasn't doubling down on a war versus Iran, it wasn't calling for a pardon of Netanyahu in the Knesset. It wasn't boasting about Miriam Adelson having closer allegiances to Israel than the United States. It was anti-Semitism, right? That's what he's going with. And Dave didn't get a chance to really rebut this. They went to a different topic, so I cut it there. But that is what we're dealing with. This is such excuse-making and totally absurd for the IDF to be called, the most moral army in the world. It's just such absurd Hasbara propaganda. Thankfully, Americans are seeing through it. Not our politicians, by and large, but Americans are. And it is generational. It's mostly younger Americans in general. Not a blanket rule. There are older Americans that don't agree with the Israel First mantra and haven't for almost their entire lives too. But younger people are just not giving this the lip service that our fathers and our fathers' fathers' generations had. And that is the truth. Dave just completely destroyed this guy. He spent at least half of his verbiage not even making arguments, just making absurd references and, you know, talking about Clarissa Ward of all people as if that was to become the new subject of the debate. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the atrocities at all. We're just going to talk about Clarissa Ward's being duped or, you know, journalistic integrity. Just so stupid, but that's what I get. What do you guys think? Do you think Dave smacked this guy around? Do you think that these takes are just going to age worse than any other takes that have supported Israel in the past? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Piers Morgan. Great segment. Say what you want about Piers. He sure inspires fiery debates. And Dave just handed it to this guy. I wish Dave would have actually had more time to chime in, but that's what you get with people like this that just ramble on about nothingness for half of their argument. Also, if you like this video and my take, please consider joining the channel as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, you'll get immediate access to all of my members only videos. You'll get to see those before they go live to the general public. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact or the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you out to a site. You just plug in your email and I'll send that to you free of charge. And just no cost, no obligation, just because I appreciate you watching. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.